can help you in a lot of things. If you become president or something, it'll help you with documents. If you want to play video games, you have to find out which one it is. And if you want to read kind of scary books, you have to learn how to read.
In order to get a job, you gotta know how to read. In order to be in school, you gotta know how to read. Well, if you learn how to read, you can learn other things besides reading. You can learn like about space or other countries or anything really.
Almost everything is involved in reading.
In late April of 1995, major newspapers reported that California's fourth graders scored among the lowest in the nation on the 1994 National Assessment of Educational Progress exam, with almost 60% unable to demonstrate a basic understanding of what they read. Key state legislators, educators, and others publicly declared in May of 1995 that we had better get our act together and get moving. Here at the state capitol, Republican and Democratic legislatures called for changes in our schools to teach basic reading skills and to ensure that basic instructional materials included, but are not limited to, systematic, explicit phonics and spelling. By October, the governor signed into law the two ABC bills, AB 170 and AB 1504, with unanimous votes from both the Assembly and the Senate. Also in May, Delane Easton, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, called for the formation of a task force on reading to be responsive to the abysmal NAEP test results.
They came up with some powerful suggestions about what California needed to do to improve its reading. Those suggestions are the same that you would hear if you went to most schools across the state of California. That for whatever reasons, we went through a period where we didn't do enough to emphasize basic skill development. Yes, we know that children need not just basic skills. You could sound out words and still not understand their meaning. But the reality is either extreme will be damaging to the children of California. We need a balanced reading program.
Throughout the spring of 1996, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the State Board of Education, the Governor's Office, and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing collaborated to develop the program advisory, Teaching Reading, a balanced, comprehensive approach to teaching reading in pre-kindergarten through grade 3. In the preface, it is established that there is sufficient guidance now available from research about how children best learn to read and about how successful reading programs work to ensure that virtually every child will learn to read well by the end of 3rd grade. It is believed that this program advisory was the springboard for the flood of legislative and executive actions that followed. Many leaders throughout California collaborated to bring about the California Reading Initiative of 1996.
Well, California is responding to the crisis with a $1 billion multifaceted strategy to improve student reading achievement in the primary grades. Reducing class size in K3, kindergarten through 3rd grade to 20 pupils per teacher, state adoption of new reading instructional materials, and those are based on current and confirmed research. Special allocation of $152 million for school districts to purchase the newly adopted reading materials. $39 million allocation for in-service training for all kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers in effective reading instruction. A $6 million program to reform teacher training in reading instruction at the teachers' colleges, and a new credential requirement that new teachers must demonstrate that they know how to teach reading, and $2 million leadership training program designed for school board members and for district school administrators. This takes a multifaceted approach, and it addresses the need to reinforce the classroom with instructional materials that are going to teach children to read, with teachers who know how to teach the process, and by administrators and school board members who will provide the leadership to see that it happens.
There are 3 ideas that I like to think about in talking about the California Reading Initiative. The first one is complete. What we tried to do is provide opportunities for students to have a complete reading program. That is one that includes direct instruction in systematic explicit phonics within a context of rich literature. The second idea is consistent, that in each of the elements of the initiative, we wanted to send a consistent message about this complete reading program. And the third idea, the third C, is complexity. There's a fear in the field among some people that somehow California is going to swing back to a drill and kill approach to English and language arts. And I want to dispel that fear, because the message is a complete one. That is, we don't want to give up the richness that students have access to with stories and poems and chants and oral language and writing. We just want to make sure that every classroom and every child has an opportunity to learn the fundamental skills of reading, the decoding skills, through a systematic, explicit approach to phonics and basic literacy. One way to show how these three C's tie together is to think in terms of a wheel of reading. The center of the wheel is the classroom. That's where it all takes place between the teacher and the students. The rim of the wheel is the hub, is the message that we tried to develop through the reading advisory, especially the one about teaching reading to students.
As the program advisory states, any changes made to improve or enhance reading instruction and practice should be informed by current research while conforming to relevant statutes. Research indicates that a direct and organized way of acquainting children with the major components of our alphabetic system is more effective than an indirect approach which lacks precision, order, and clarity. What are the major research findings that have direct implications for board policy and program implementation? We asked key researchers and university faculty to respond. Is reading a natural or learned process?
I think everybody would like reading to be natural because it makes everything easier and seem more holistic and child-friendly. At the same time, I think there's considerable evidence that it is not natural for large numbers of students and requires explicit instruction. We still have this sort of hope that it wouldn't have to be that way, particularly because we want the kids into the reading act as soon as possible so they can enjoy it and make use of it as we adults do.
How important are the cueing systems?
I think one of the most difficult parts about beginning reading that I currently see a lot of teachers struggling with is this notion of three cueing systems with semantic, syntactic, and graphophonic cues. There is a sense that readers should use all three of these. Frequently it's stated in equal proportion. Some folks even feel that the contextual cues of semantic, syntactic should even be more important. I don't think that everybody realizes that beginning readers have a natural propensity to try to use context, and that a lot of very explicit, deliberate instruction on our part is needed to convince them that spelling sound strategies are in fact a preferable approach to figuring out words. Not saying that context doesn't have a role, but it's more of a backup role rather than the first strategy that should always be tried.
What is phonics? Why does it need to be taught more systematically?
Well, phonics is the idea of having letters and sound correspondences be made explicit for children. I think the hardest thing to explain is why instruction needs to be systematic and explicit or direct. A lot of teachers would like the freedom to pull a particular phonic principle out of the air one day as they are reading a big book and make an informal lesson around that particular phonic principle. There's really an order and a sequence to when phonic principles should be taught. Unless a teacher is highly knowledgeable about that order and sequence, you may as well put it down in a book so they have that available to them. The second issue is about the explicitness. The children who have difficulty learning to read often have difficulty because they don't have enough practice with the particular principle being taught. So you have to have the connected text to practice that principle enough times that you can be sure that all children are going to understand it. And that's, I think, a lot of teachers have a little bit of difficulty understanding that degree of explicitness and that amount of systematic ordering of instruction.
Is reading instruction now going back to the basics, phonics as taught in the past?
I would say 20 years ago, it was thought of as just another way, a kind of philosophy or a preference that some people had, or a fad that educators went through every so often. But now we know differently. There is a solid research base that shows very clearly that in order to be a good reader, a person has to be able to use phonics, that is to break this code and attach sounds to these symbols, and to do that rapidly and automatically so that they can pay attention to what the words mean. So it's no longer just sort of one other way to teach reading. It turns out that it's an absolutely necessary thing for people to be able to do if they're going to be good readers, and it's something we have to teach kids if they're having trouble with it before they can be fluent readers.
Do all students need to learn phonics?
The answer to that question is yes. And we've only really come to understand how strongly, how imperatively, how undismissibly yes that is through the kinds of technology we've developed in the last 20 years that let us be voyeurs on the mental processes involved in reading. And yes, it turns out that in order to read fluently, in order to read in a way that your reading grows through reading, you really do have to map those spellings onto your speech. You have to make reading just part of the whole language system, and that's the way the head does it.
Why is phoneme awareness important in early reading instruction?
Phoneme awareness is necessary but not sufficient for learning to read, because phoneme awareness is an auditory process of learning to realize that words have syllables, they have these phonemes, and these phonemes can be dropped in the beginning of the word or the end of the word. We can rhyme words, and that's sound play, if you will. We can do that in kindergarten and first grade, but we also need to follow that up with some direct, explicit instruction in how the alphabet works, how those segments of speech get mapped onto the letters, and that's the necessary and sufficient component. If you just do phonological awareness or phonemic awareness all by itself, it may never connect to reading. We have to help the children make the connection.
Well, phonemic awareness is crucial because it turns out that it's not enough just to know phonics. You have to know how to use those sounds as you read. Combining sounds is one example of phonemic awareness. I can show you students who know the sounds of s, I, t, but when they see the word, they can't blend the sounds and say sit. That's one very concrete example where it's not enough to know just phonics. It's can you understand how to manipulate the sounds in speech.
Keith Stenovich's article on called Romance and Reality stated it very clearly. He said if kids have phonemic awareness, they can decode. If they can learn to decode and can do it fluently and automatically, then they can read. Once they begin to read, then they can reinforce the skills they have and become readers. Then they begin to read that millions of words a year they need to in order to be good readers. So it all really starts with phonemic awareness. It's extraordinarily important. And in the reading task force, we made a call that every kindergarten, first grade child in California would be tested for and taught phonemic awareness, and I think that's a good goal.
What does whole language still offer for a comprehensive, balanced, research-based reading program?
No, I think that we've learned a great deal from whole language. I still consider myself basically a whole language person. Prior to whole language, we didn't pay much attention to literature. There's far more good literature in the classrooms. The studies on it simply say that children now expect more comprehension than they did in the past. They know that the books have meaning. They're trying to get to that meaning. Along with that became a renewed emphasis with the writing process. We have students that are writing more, and they're writing more procedurally rather than just trying to turn in finished projects. I think the oral language base is improved. The concept of invented spelling, which was really heightened during the whole language period, still is proven very important for kindergarten students, etc. So that there's really much to say.
It's also injected kind of playfulness and enjoyment for both the teacher and the kids with a lot of the activities that have been emphasized. It's also given us a sense that kids can be actively involved in learning language. They don't have to be at their little desks doing little workbook things in order to be learning about reading and writing.
I think the whole language movement was a very important reflection of a much overdue revolution in American education. That is, it went back to the classroom and said, all right, this isn't just about rote memorizing some list of things that you need to know, facts and poems that you need to know by the time you get out of 6th grade or 12th grade. What you're supposed to be doing in school is learning tools only for the sake of learning and being able and thinking and being able to learn other things that you need to know. So as part of that movement, whole language was a movement to engage children in thinking from the start, engage them in appreciating why they were learning what they were learning and how to use it, in integration across the curriculum, in combining reading and writing, in appreciating that every child will develop in different ways and should be encouraged to develop in different ways.
There have been a lot of very positive things that we want to keep. Whole language has emphasized the importance of good literature, the importance of writing, the importance of invented spelling, that early on children can make the connections between the sounds they hear and letters that represent them on the way to becoming conventional spellers. All of these things are wonderful consequences of whole language, and we should keep them, but we also need to remember some of the aspects of phonics that will help the children become very facile in using the alphabet.
There were and are a lot of positive components of the whole language movement. The notion that students should do a lot of meaningful reading because they want to, because it makes sense to them, because this is something that they get a lot out of. Very important idea. My sense that if we do not encourage students to sort of adopt literacy as a way of life, all the skilled instruction in phonics is not going to be of sufficient value to produce literate students and citizens.
Is it possible to diagnose early reading difficulties and remediate them through early intervention strategies?
If you take a look at the research, it says that the predictors of whether or not a child can read are all school-based factors. These are school-based predictors. And what it says is that children learn how to read who are taught to read in school. So certainly, it says they need phonemic awareness. It says they need letter knowledge, letter names, letter shapes. It says they need concepts about print, etc. All of these are school-based factors, and all are easy to test. We need, especially at the early grades, to make sure the kids are getting these. It doesn't matter what their background is, they can learn these things. These are not subject to background, basically. They're just skills to be learned. We can teach them. We can test for them every 8 weeks or 10 weeks. We can see whether or not the kids have them. And then early intervention is extraordinarily important. If the students get early intervention, we have a very high probability that we can have these students catch up. We wait to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. We have a much more difficult time.
Kids who don't learn to read well can be identified before they fail. One of the really hopeful things about the research program that has been supported by the government and also by other independent research groups is that we know how to find kids before they fail. We can find them through some fairly simple tests in the end of kindergarten and the beginning of first grade. We can put them into preventive programs. We also know what kinds of classroom programs work better than others to prevent and reduce reading failure.
Why can't we just wait and see if children will grow out of their reading problems before we invest too much time and money on early diagnosis and interventions?
Well, there are two reasons. One is that longitudinal research, which is research that follows children, individual children, through the years, shows that they don't as a group. That those who have problems in the first grade remain behind in the third grade. They don't catch up. That if you intervene, intervention is most powerful in the first grade. It's marginally effective in the second grade, and at least for large samples, grades 3 and up, it hardly matters.
Their self-esteem is poor. They are often unmotivated to try to become readers. By this time, they may be couch potatoes and spend most of their time watching TV, and the last thing they want to do is pick up a book because they're not good at it. So like any skill, it needs to be learned at the right time so that you can have fun with it. And if you put off learning some of these basic components, then you're going to find it's harder and harder to get children reading well.
The Department of Education has now looked at these statistics, and that's one of the reasons for the great interest now in kindergarten support. And I personally agree with that. If you can just, play with the kids so that they are comfortable with their letters, so they understand what reading's about, so they're ready to do it, they want to, I think first grade would just be a pleasure.
In order for us to truly make reading a priority for our K-3 students, the California Reading Initiative calls us to take action now to ensure that student reading results improve.
All of us, including myself, have to become more knowledgeable about the process of learning to read. We have to learn along with our teachers. We can't direct from afar. It's a sophisticated process, learning to read. One of the other things that we need to be sure that we do is that we ask our teachers, are your students learning to read, and how do you know they're learning to read? What's the evidence? Can we show it with each other? And then modify the program with the knowledge that we have about good first instruction in reading.
I would say to my fellow principals and administrators that it's very important to partake of the staff development opportunities that exist from one's professional organization, like the Association of California School Administrators, and or one's district, or from the county office, or from the State Department. That our role as principals is not simply to manage the initiative, but to be also an integral part of it, so that we symbolize the hope that we have for the children by being active participants in the process.
Well, I see that the process of reading takes a lot of different avenues. And for myself, I think that one is teacher instruction. And I know that teachers have to know what they're doing. I know we do a lot of training on teaching teachers that. But I think we still need to continue. It's not something that should stop. I would also look at having some kind of component where the parents have to be a part of what we're doing, and that teachers need to know how to bring in the kids and bring in the parents so that it's a community effort and not just a teacher-child effort. And then the last one I would look at is making sure that there's time for us to kind of put this together, because asking us to do it on an hour prep 3 times a week isn't going to be enough. This is something serious, so I would mandate something where we have the time, we have the parents, and then we have the training.
As a parent, I'm very, very concerned. And what I am counting on, what I really would hope for, is that the public schools will ensure that my child, my first grader, will be able to read by the time she leaves that classroom.
The state, between the governor's office, the State Board of Education, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, have focused on this issue, and this gives local districts the empowerment to provide the necessary tools to teachers and students to enhance the quality of reading in their communities. To me, the excitement about it all is the entire state and the entire local community can focus on teaching children to read. This is going to open doors for so many kids, whether they come from advantaged homes or disadvantaged homes. I've been around a long time and I have never seen this much excitement about any one area in education.
With the California Reading Initiative, we have achieved a remarkable amount of consensus about what California needs to do. This consensus, I might add, goes across party lines up and down the state between rural, suburban, and urban educators. It is a consensus that the business community supports as well as all of the leading stakeholder groups in education. It is a consensus about making sure that every child is a powerful reader.
The initiative calls for collaboration on many levels to realize our goals and to ensure that all kids can read by the end of 3rd grade.
The role of the local school board member is one of leadership and establishing policy. In addition to that, under this particular reading initiative, we also have to make sure that we have good professional development programs in place, that we adopt instructional materials that support the reading initiative, and that we provide teacher training and training also for lead teachers, superintendents, and board members so that they can implement the reading program.
It is also a very momentous day for California that we have taken a major step forward in some materials that I think have generated more conversation and interest in. And so I think that bodes well.
The State Board's action marks the largest adoption of language arts, reading, and English as a second language materials in 8 years. In addition to the instructional material funds of approximately $31 per ADA, AB3482 offers an extra $152 million, or $80 per ADA for K-3 reading materials. Materials purchased with the extra monies must meet the ABC bill's requirement of including explicit, systematic phonics and spelling content and be on the approved adoption material list. These instructional materials add one more piece to the state's interlocking attempt to shore up California's students' reading skills.
I would like to make sure that people, the public, understands that while we're going about implementing this initiative, we do need the full cooperation and collaboration of everyone involved. This also includes all of the educational components, which also includes higher education and training of teachers and encouragement of teachers to really teach these children the basics that they need for success in reading.
Have you read this book already and practiced and practiced?
No.
In closing, we asked, what would you expect to see in our California classrooms in 5 years?
I expect to see literacy education beginning gently and playfully in the preschool years. I expect to see children comfortable with their letters by the time they finish kindergarten, comfortable writing them and recognizing them, which doesn't mean doing it perfectly. I expect them to have played with language enough to be comfortable with phonemic awareness, to understand the alphabetic principle when they get out of kindergarten, which doesn't mean that they'll be reading and writing, but that they'll understand it.
I hope to see children reading lots and reading with understanding. And I think I'll be seeing that if I see teachers in kindergarten and 1st, 2nd grade focusing on helping children understand phonemic awareness, alphabetic principle, orthographic issues, and carrying all this good understanding into the ability to read and to enjoy reading.
I would like to see literacy becoming the major focus of schools, elementary schools across the state, and where teachers and principals and parents and the students, of course, are all part of this learning community dedicated to making literacy and reading exciting for all. I fell in love with books when I was very young, and I would like everyone to have a love of books and experience the joy of reading and writing and speaking effectively and communicating well. I want that for all children, and I think it's possible.
I would hope that we would see longer literacy classroom periods. I would hope that the average first graders' so-called reading time is 2 hours. And what that would tell me is that we're still spending an hour a day building background and building vocabulary and working with literature and writing stories and doing the rest of that. And we're using 30 or 45 minutes a day to teach a new skill and to review old skills and to apply the skills that they're learning, etc. We'd see room filled with good materials. We would see kids both learning skills directly and applying them in many rich settings. We need not only to be child-centered, but we need to be goal-centered. Teachers need to know where they're going. They need to have a sense of that 3-year goal, how to get there, what are the major components, and then be child-centered in helping the kids get there. And we'll see dramatic improvement, I think, through that.
I'd like to come back to California and find that all of us professionals who are responsible for making decisions are headed down the same track with some sense of unity and collaboration. I'd like to see our energy going into being the nation's leaders in preventing reading failure. I'd like to see some studies of California children that show that they are once again leading the nation and that this can be accomplished in a state of great diversity, and that we have literally saved the lives of all those kids who at one time would have been failures.
Well, the state of California has never really embarked upon an initiative of this magnitude in terms of dollars invested and legislative directives as to the goals that we have to accomplish. Close to $1 billion expended on this issue of reading. And again, it relates, I think, to the issue of test scores and how central people view reading in the educational process. If someone has not mastered basic literacy, their ability to thrive and to be successful in every aspect of the academic curriculum later on, and of course once they get out of school, if they don't have a facility with the English language in terms of reading, they're going to be at a tremendous disadvantage.
I think this is the most exciting event that we have seen in education, and I've been involved with education for many years as a former teacher, and I really can get terribly excited about the promise of what this is going to provide for our children. I know that the parents are excited, there's a high expectation level, and we're going to make it work. And we will make it work if we can provide the leadership, and this means that school board members, administrators are going to have to be a strong and a firm commitment to make sure it does work. We all have high hopes. It's an exciting time for education. We really are in a renaissance of learning, and I think this will provide for the future in a way that we're all going to receive the benefits.
This is a very exciting time for California. It's exciting because we have achieved this uncommon consensus and because we've actually got some resources to back us up. But what does that mean for us? It means out there, as you listen to this, administrators, please make sure that you are structuring the time in your district and your school to ensure that teachers have the time to get the staff development required to make them powerful teachers of reading. Make sure that enough time in the classroom is devoted to reading. If you are a teacher, you must make sure you've got those skills. In some cases, that'll mean taking additional coursework, either at the fine universities, public and private in this state, or through your own districts or through your own county offices. Help us to make sure that you've got what you need in the way of staff development and training. If you are a board member, make sure that the policies that your district sets put reading first, at the very top of the list of the skills that children must achieve in their time in school. But make reading an absolute priority for your district. Last, but certainly not least, if you are a parent, remember you're the most important teacher that your child will ever have. If each of you were to read 20 minutes a night to your children, your child would read an additional 1 million words a year.
So, read all about it. Research supports California's reading initiative. Reading is the top priority for kindergartners, first, second, and third graders. By the end of grade 3, all kids will read at grade level or above. The time is now. The key to what happens in each teacher's classroom is up to us. We need to renew our excitement and commitment to teach all kids to read in the early grades and to restore our emphasis on teaching the critical reading skills. Let's begin. Today is day one.
Let's say it was your job to teach your little sister how to read. How would you do that?
Well, I would teach her the letters first and their sounds, the short vowels, the long vowels, which I'm not sure of right now. I'm not sure. And I would teach her the words. She has flashcards right now about the words. I'll teach her the words. I'll give her easy books for now, and then when she grows bigger, I'll give her harder and harder books.
Then I would say just sound it out for beginners, because some words, the letters are silent. So for starters, I would just give them really easy words like cat and dog, tell them to sound it out.
First, I would help them to sound out the words, and then I would show them what the words mean and how they're pronounced and something like that.